Okay, ready?
Oh, my God.
Don't be
Easton, Reading, Region 9, Boards of Education, excuse me. At Joe Barlow High School, Tuesday, May 28th at 7:30 p.m. Each board has to do a separate call to order, so I will, at this point, right now, call to order the Easton Board of Education. Ready?
Reading has a quorum, call to order, 7:31.
Very good. And Mike, are you in business?
Call the Region 9 meeting to order at 7:32.
Okay, 7:30. Public comment.
The budget passed, we would
Beg your pardon?
no, never mind. No, I'm not for the public.
Okay. No public comment? Okay. Board member comment? Okay. I have one comment. I'd like to introduce to the Reading and the ER9 board, John Stinson, who is our newest board member. He took over for Cindy Short, who resigned here about a month ago, and so John's on board and doing a great job for us so far. So, John, welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, discussion and possible action. Healthy foods certification and exemption for food and beverage items. Scott, is that you?
Yes, so this is an annual process that we go through. We're required to annually confirm the healthy food certification. That's that each board individually will certify that all food items offered for sale to students will meet the Connecticut nutrition standards. And then there's a second motion that we always pass, which exempts food and beverage items that are used for sale for fundraising after school hours. So each of the board chairs has a motion that's individual to their district. We need to pass each of these through each of them, and a full text of the motion needs to appear in the minutes, which we then provide as confirmation to the state food service board.
All right, well then, we'll do the motions first, and then we'll open it up for any discussion or any Q&A, and then we'll go from there. Easton, we'll get started first. Well, in fact, I guess I can't read the motion. You read them.
First motion regarding healthy food certification. For the 2019-2020 fiscal year, the Easton Board of Education will continue to certify to the Connecticut State Department of Education that all food items offered for sale to students separately from a reimbursable lunch will meet Connecticut nutrition standards. Such certification shall include all food offered for sale to students at all times, in all schools, and from all sources, including but not limited to school stores, vending machines, school cafeterias, and any fundraising activities on school premises sponsored by the school or by non-school organizations and groups.
Well read.
Do we have a second? Thank you, Katie. Okay, ready?
I make a motion that for the healthy food certification for the 2019-2020 fiscal year, the Reading Board of Education will continue to certify to the Connecticut State Department of Education that all food items offered for sale to students separately from a reimbursable lunch will meet Connecticut nutritional standards. Such certification shall include all food offered for sale to students at all times in all schools and from all sources, including but not limited to school stores, vending machines, school cafeterias, and any fundraising activities on school premises sponsored by the school or by non-school organizations and groups. Second.
Well done.
I'm sorry, who
For a
was the
second.
second? Okay, thanks. Michael?
Chris, you want to read it?
Absolutely. I move for the 2019-2020 fiscal year, the Region 9 Board of Education will continue to certify to the Connecticut State Department of Education that all food items offered for sale to students separately from a reimbursable lunch will meet the Connecticut nutrition standards. Such certification shall include all food offered for sale to students at all times, in all schools, and from all sources, including but not limited to school stores, vending machines, school cafeterias, and lactating animals. No. Fundraising activity, that was really strange. And any fundraising activities on school premises sponsored by the school or by non-school organizations.
And who second?
I'll second without lactating.
Thank you for both those. Okay, any discussion? I'll start with Reading. Any discussion about motion?
Is there a downside to this? This is just the normal thing that we do? Yeah, okay, got it.
Ready for a vote?
Please do.
All in favor? Unanimous?
Any discussion from the Easton side? No? Okay, all in favor?
Okay, so I have one question, which is, says such certification shall include all food offered for sale to students at all times, in all schools, from all sources, included but not limited to stores, vending machines, school cafeteria. We have vending machines out there, is that correct?
That's correct.
They have non-compliant food sources in there, is that also correct?
Not that I know of, I think they're all compliant, we don't have candy.
We don't have Rice Krispie treats and stuff like that?
Compliant.
There's a special one.
Yeah.
There's a special Rice Krispie treat.
Confer with Dave.
Yeah.
Yes, all the snacks and the vending machines are compliant with the Connecticut state regulations.
For those who don't know, Dave Kennedy is the food services director for Chartwell's.
So yeah, we do regular checks of vending machines just to make sure Berkshire is not trying to sneak anything in there. Sometimes they'll put stuff in there, we let them know. Orlando also does, biannual audits of the machines themselves, so they're all compliant.
Is it a special Rice Krispie treat?
It's a whole grain.
It's a special, yeah, it's a special Rice Krispie treat.
Like the Doritos are different as well.
So there's no
We learned about it last week.
Pizza's a vegetable, Mike.
I just wanted to ask and make sure. Any further discussion at Region 9? All in favor?
And we have a second motion?
Oh, poor Denny.
I move, or Easton moves that, do I need to say something?
Yeah.
Easton moves that for the 2019-2020 fiscal year, the Easton Board of Education will allow the sale to students of food items that do not meet Connecticut nutrition standards, beverages that do not meet the requirements of the state statute, section 10-221Q of the Connecticut General Statutes provided. 1, such sale is in connection with an event occurring after the end of the regular school day or on the weekend. 2, such sale is at the location of the event. And 3, such food and/or beverage is not sold from a vending machine or school door. An event is an occurrence that involves more than just a regularly scheduled practice, meeting, or extracurricular activity. The school day is the period from midnight to 30 minutes after the end of the official school day. Location means where the event is being held and must be the same place as the food and beverage sales. Do I have a second? Or object to using that, sorry.
Katie seconded?
Second.
Okay, very good.
You do so well.
Thank you. I move that the Reading Board for the 2019-20 fiscal year, the Reading Board of Education will allow the sale to students of food items that do not meet Connecticut nutritional standards and beverages that do not meet the requirements of the state statute, section 10-221Q of the Connecticut General Statutes, provided 1, such sale is in connection with an event occurring after the end of the regular school day or on the weekend. 2, such sale is at the location of the event. And 3, such food and/or beverage is not sold from a vending machine or school store. An event is an occurrence that involves more than just a regularly scheduled practice, meeting, or extracurricular activity. The school day is the period from midnight to 30 minutes after the end of the official school day. Location means where the event is being held and must be the same place as the food and beverage sales.
Second.
Michael?
I looked down in case somebody else has a cheaper.
time. He enjoyed the humor.
Pressure's on now.
Just so sure, not being filmed.
You are being
Oh, good, good. Move for the 2019-2020 fiscal year, the Region 9 Board of Education will allow the sale to students of food items that and beverages that do not meet the requirements of state statute, section 221Q, of the Connecticut General Statutes, provided one, such sale is in connection with an event occurring after the end of the regular school day or on the weekend. Two, such sale is at the location of the event. And three, such food and/or beverage is not sold from a vending machine or school store. An event is an occurrence that involves more than just a regularly scheduled practice meeting or extracurricular activity. The school day is the period from midnight to 30 minutes after the end of the official school day. Location means where the event is being held and must be the same place as the food and beverage sales.
Second.
Okay. Any questions, discussion from Reading?
Discussion? No? All in favor? Unanimous.
Easton, any questions or discussion? No? Okay, all in favor?
Further discussion, move to none.
Very good, thank you. Next on the list is the Chartwell contract. Scott, do you want this, or you want me to do it?
Well, we held our joint food committee meeting about a month or so ago.
It was May 3rd.
May 3rd, with representatives from each of the boards, and reviewed, as we do annually, a variety of things. We take input on feedback from parents. There's a formal survey that is conducted. I've distributed a copy of those results to each of you, not intended to go through in detail, but just for you to see in general. I'll comment on that briefly. We had about 15% of parents respond, which is actually a pretty good number to response. And the average response was a 4 out of 5 in terms of overall positive comments, and no real material issues that came up. We did identify a few operational follow-ups to pursue, mostly around additional communicating things that, comments came through that indicated that people weren't aware of certain things, for example. So we took that as a cue to continue to communicate more. The committee also had an opportunity to talk with members who were present from Chartwell's, Dave Kennedy, director, and their nutritional director as well, Stephanie Noto, prior nutritional director, was in attendance at the meeting. So we discussed those items, and then Jeff, you could probably discuss the action that the committee took based on those views.
Well, just a couple of the things that came out in the discussions and in the parent survey. The parents were concerned that there wasn't enough time for kids to eat. That between standing in lunch line and then the time at the table was sometimes not sufficient. But generally speaking, and Mrs. Ponzo's observations, Chartwell does an excellent job considering that they're bound by the guidelines of the National School Lunch Program and how food is prepared, which involves salt content, whole wheat component, and portion size to meet the calorie count. So it was determined by our committee that we recommend to the tri-board that we continue with Chartwell. The contract will be entitled Amendment Number 3, and the first sentence of it is that this Amendment Number 3, dated April 30th, 2019, effective July 1, 2019, is between Easton, Reading, and Region 9 Boards of Education and the Compass Group USA by and through its Chartwell division. And it says that as we had talked about this initially a couple of years ago that we wanted to stay with Chartwell, but we wanted to have a yearly review and to make sure that the expectations for both the children and the parents were being met, and that they've done that, we feel, quite successfully. And so the committee that we continue with Chartwell and renew our current contract.
We have to vote to renew,
Right.
or this is just an annual review and the contract is still in force?
It's, we have a yearly contract with 4 renewals, and this is the second renewal.
So the contract is expiring on June 30th unless we take action to renew the contract?
Correct.
And
Correct.
are the financial terms the same in the renewal year as they are now?
They differ slightly.
And should we be retiring to executive session to discuss a contract that we're going to consider adopting?
We certainly could. I mean, we're talking about literally pennies difference.
Pennies on a lot of lunches, it's dollars.
Frankly, I wish there were more lunches. Then that would be better for us. I don't think it's necessary, but I will yield to the opinion of the tri-board. If they feel as a group that we should, then we certainly do. But it's not the recommendation of our committee.
Our board is part of that committee.
I'm on that committee, but I was not.
So this is
This is a one-year renewal. We signed the initial contract. It was a one-year contract with 4 yearly renewals. This is now year 3, so it's the second renewal, 3rd year of the contract. And
what's the reason for the yearly renewal?
we did that because 3 years ago, there was concern about, parent concern about about our relationship with Chartwell, and there were some things that they wanted to see differently, and they brought it to the various boards, and the boards felt it would be important to take the business out to bid, which we did. And we have 3 companies that were interested. We took bids from all of them. Well, I'm sorry, we took bids from 2. One of the companies did not bid in the final go-round. But after reviewing the bids and promises made within, it was our determination that Chartwell was the best company to go with or to stay with, and that we made that decision at that time. But again, wanted to be sure that we had input in this whole process, and that's why it's a yearly contract with 4 renewals, as opposed to just a 5-year contract that we sign and then sort of forget about it, and that's probably not a good way to conduct business.
Is this sent to us ahead of time? Did I miss it?
The survey? No.
The survey was discussed in great detail at the Joint Board Wellness Committee meeting last week. So Katie represented the Easton Board, Colleen was there from the Reading Board, Vance was not present from the Region 9 Board, and we really went through pretty much item by item and discussed the survey with Mr. Kennedy present. And so we had a good, healthy discussion about any feedback and what might be remedied on the part of either individual school buildings or by the food service.
Did the committee feel that all the past issues or comments were adequately addressed? It sounds like they did, if they're making the
The
recommendation.
issues of probably 3 years ago have definitely been addressed.
Carol, but we also see consistent set of questions from parents coming to school. So I think there's also messaging involved, and we talked about this, that we just have to get into the habit of every time there's a new crop of parents, that we are sharing this information. It's not like you get to share it once and they remember, you know. And so, it's being addressed in a communications plan, but we do expect some of these questions to come up every time a parent is exposed to the cafeteria.
For instance, I've been speaking with the PTA, the Easton PTA, to have Chartwell's give a presentation at the beginning of the coming school year to address some of the concerns.
Can I make a suggestion? In the past, we would get financial information. How many lunches you sold, how many lunches you sold last year, what your profit margin, how you're doing. You know, it'd be helpful. I trust that the committee looked at this and said that everything is okay, right? But we don't know whether we sold more lunches this year or last year, whether it's a trend, whether we're, you know, that would be helpful, I think, to kind of see. But again, trust the committee. Just questions, and again, I'm sure they were addressed by the committee, but I'm eager to understand if there was any action or suggestions. But when you look at the survey, it seems like more than half of the students don't like the taste of the food everywhere except at Joe Barlow. That's a little alarming to me. And also that there's not enough time to buy and eat lunch, again, is more than half of the students everywhere except at John Reed and Barlow and at Helen Keller, which seems like they have plenty of time. But just curious as to if that was discussed and if there is any proposed action to try to improve that, or whether we don't feel that that's really an issue because there's so much variability in the survey that we get every year. Just kind of curious as to,
Which committee are you asking? The Wellness Committee addresses those things, but are you asking the negotiating committee?
there's no negotiating committee. We're talking to the Wellness Committee that met with.
And
But
there's
I-
also a food service committee.
I did not do anything with the contract. I don't know if you're talking to the group that was reviewing the contract or not.
Well, the contract, according to Jeff, is set in place. It's a 5-year one that it gets renewed.
Correct.
And it's the board's option to renew?
Yes.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but that's so that we can address, in the past when we have had issues with Chartwell's, they were very amenable to making corrections that we asked them to make. And I assume that now we would likewise be able to ask for changes to their services along with the renewal of this contract. Yeah.
I was just curious, when the food committee meets with them, did they have these results, and was this discussed, and what was, the outcome of the discussion, or was there no discussion?
The Wellness Committee did.
Right.
And Dave was there. And so there's like regulations about, for example, the pasta that can be offered. This is the one I'm remembering. And so the regulation recently changed, and so we know that we can now provide, I hope I'm getting this right, a different kind of pasta that we know that most people prefer, those kinds of things. The
timing for lunch?
Oh, yes,
The
thank
amount
you.
of
Yep.
time for lunch doesn't have to do with Chartwell's, my
Right.
understanding. It has to do
Exactly.
with
School
Sure, it's the scheduling that
However, and I think it's a supportive relationship, because Chartwell's was also very open to any adjustments they could make in what they're offering in the day. For example, in RES, there's a deli bar, and perhaps we don't offer the deli bar every day because kids are standing there and like thinking about what they have to order, and it can slow down the whole process. So although it is a scheduling thing, and an action was to talk to administration and John Reed, right, because they have the option for recess, to just leverage that as best as possible. But I will also say that Chartwell's offered to, support
however they can.
I'm fine, I don't need all the, I just wanted to make sure.
Yes, it was reviewed.
these Discussions took place and that.
So in
the-
food service is the same, again, we didn't address the timing for the lunch period, but we did look through, the other item that people have in front of them there where the food service equipment was purchased,
Right.
recommendations that were made last year around staffing for Chartwells and some adjustments that they made. Those were included. And we did also look at, student revenue generated from those.
So that was all looked at by the committee.
The food
Mhm,
services
the
committee.
food service committee, exactly.
And relating to the equipment purchase, we had a discussion over the last couple of years as to what determination is made as to what equipment is purchased. Is it proportional? Is it equitable? Is it based on just pure need? Who makes that determination? And I'm just curious as to whether we have set guidelines and procedures in place that relate to that, or whether somebody on the committee or Scott can talk to how we determine what is purchased, because obviously when we buy a piece of equipment, that's money from the 3 districts, and if we're spending all the money in one district, that's not really equitable.
Right, so it's driven by need. Some of it is routine annual maintenance types of activities, like cleaning of the kitchens. So that's scheduled and done at all schools. Pricing, of course, varies because the size of the facilities at each school varies. But in terms of equipment replacement and repair, it's 100% driven by need. So it's essentially a break-fix type of an approach.
It looks as though you have the totals at the bottom of the itemized sheet. Correct.
Correct. So that's, what you have in front of you is year-to-date fiscal 18-19. It's obviously not complete, but it's through the end of April. It's going to vary by school. We're going to see Barlow again being the highest item, and that was driven really by something that happened about a month ago, which dealt with replacing the refrigeration on the 3 large walk-in refrigerators at Barlow. This was material fix that needed to be done, $14,000, again, because of the size of it. But they were at end of life and failing, so we replaced the 3 of those. And the process is the same as it would be for any of the boards in regard to the 3-bid policy minimum for any expenditure over either 7,500 in Easton or 10,000 in the other 2 districts. That's required not only from board perspective, but it's also required. This program is under very, very extreme oversight by the state of Connecticut. Very detailed oversight by the state of Connecticut. So we maintain essentially all of the same type of backup that we would do from a board standpoint for purposes of presenting the state in the event that they come and audit us as well, which happens on a periodic basis.
Any other questions?
So just so I'm clear, so that this financial breakout that has the equipment, that's charged to each respective district, but that's separate from the actual nominal increase that's part of the Chartwell's renewal, right?
No, the only
No
relationship
relationship,
is these charges are paid from the food service account. And the food service account pays Chartwell's, pays for the food, pays for this type of break-fix type of thing. And the revenues from the food service itself go into that account. So
it's a separate account from the operating budget?
that's correct. It's not a part of the operating budget, completely separate and completely self-contained. Again, subject to very strict oversight. There's strict reporting on it. We also are restricted on the amount of reserve that we can have there. It can't grow. We can't have too much money. There's a calculation of the maximum amount that we can have in it. Because it's not intended really to be a moneymaker, it's intended to provide the necessary amount of food services required.
So just going back to the Chartwell's renewal, what's the nominal increase for, you could either do all 3 districts or just by school? It doesn't sound like, Jeff, you said it wasn't a lot.
The
so-
increases, we manage that at a top level, so that increase is 3%, which is the consumer price index, which is what the contract calls for.
That's what the contract calls for each of the successive option renewals.
And to translate that into dollars, we pay Chartwell's a management fee. We pay for everything else. We pay for all the commodity, all the foods themselves and whatnot. So we pay Chartwell's for their management processes, which is essentially a labor operation. So their increase is, or their pay is by meal, by reimbursable meal. So the increase is 0.002 cents.
And this is a change from what we had at one point in time, which was a fixed management fee. And we went to making it by meal, because the more meals that, the more meals that are sold, the better it is for this account that we draw on when there's things that need to be fixed and replaced.
Incentivizes the provider.
Pardon me?
It incentivizes the provider.
Absolutely, sure.
And then last two things, is the price of the lunch going up next year for the students?
No change.
No, it wasn't.
Yeah, the price per meal for the students.
No, we did that last year, and and it seemed that we got very little feedback on it in terms of positive or negative. And so we have a healthy enough balance that there is no need to.
Are we concerned on the high end of the balance?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Well, we're not through a full year, and the calculation on the high end is a calculation of the last 3 months average, I think, or the highest 3 months average. I forget off the top of my head, but it's a 3 months operating average that is your maximum allowable. So that's a calculation that's subject to getting all of the numbers in and seeing it. We are running more to the black this year than we have been previously, and that's really reflective of a reduction in the charges from Chartwell's compared to last year at this time.
Is there any sort of capital plan with respect to the equipment in the 3 kitchens, or the 5 kitchens?
Not per se, but one of the things we did do, because we were running slightly above it as we came into the 18-19 year, is we do need to declare how we would intend to use any excess that there is. And essentially what we do at that point is say, well, what are the things that we think are, at that point, subject to being close to end of life. And we had, for example, a grease trap in the Keller cafeteria. It had actually been out of service for some time. We said, let's get it on the list. Repaired. It's needed to have been repaired. Let's put it on the list and do it now. So that's an example of, but there's no specific capital plan that says every 4 years we replace the stoves or the dishwashers or anything like that. It is very much a break-fix kind of a thing, but it hasn't really impacted operations.
Are we still participating in that plan where we get 10 cents a meal?
That's the National School Lunch
National
Program.
School Lunch,
Do we
yes.
have to renew that, or
No. We have to do these things as a condition of being a part of that.
so that just gets renewed automatically?
It's not a renew or not
We'd have
renew.
to
You're
vote
either,
to go out of it.
you'd have to go vote to out of it. We'd have to withdraw from the plan.
And do we make, is the service in the black without the 10 cents a meal?
It's a pretty complex calculation, and we've discussed this. We discussed it a year ago in the committee, and we discussed it briefly this year in the committee as well. It hinges a lot. You're not exempt from complying with an awful lot of the requirements, but you do have a little more flexibility in on the types of foods you can offer. It puts all of the financial risk on us because the reimbursement part of it goes away, but we're still obligated to cover things such as people who are on free and reduced lunch. So the calculation can hinge on what's the percentage of population that we would need to cover. It puts us into a little bit more of a business posture, let's say, where we have forecast our revenues and our costs and anticipate that we would be able to be ahead of them. The feedback that we've gotten when we've looked at it is, for those districts who have done it, it has worked out to be very positive for them, financially as well as in terms of the food service and the kinds of things that they can offer in the school. The risk for us, and the reason we haven't taken the step, is we think that our percentage of free and reduced that we would need to cover makes it a little too risky for us, or too close to break even to consider it in any sharp detail. So we haven't.
And the state changed the criteria for free and reduced, and I believe we went from 6% free and reduced to 11%.
That's right, and that happened just about a year ago when we were starting to seriously consider taking the step. And when that happened, we said, this is a lot more theoretical at this point than something to really pursue.
Throughout the state?
It was at that time, yes. In fact, a lot higher.
And we also have the issue of declining population. And our biggest revenue generator is Barlow. And Barlow is going to have a drop in population over the next number of years, and so there's some consideration there that.
We don't actually know that, those are just projections.
Well.
How many of the non-students buy lunch?
That question about the school lunch program also addresses the concerns of parents about the taste of the food. A lot of it has to do with they were talking about with the pasta, for example, if we're gonna.
Regulated.
Yeah, it's all regulated and it all has to be whole grain and it has to be, low sodium and everything perfectly proportionate. I know in the elementary school they throw out a lot of stuff because they're obligated to give an apple or an orange with the lunch, and the kids don't want it, didn't ask for it, and it goes in the garbage. So if we could get off of the school lunch program, I think that we all agree that would be best, but we can't right now. Right?
Yeah, it would require, I think, more risk than is worth considering at this time.
Make a motion that the Reading Board of Education exercise the option to renew the Chartwell's contract for the 1920 fiscal year.
I'll second that.
Very good.
I'll make the same motion for Easton Board.
Do you have that written down, Chris, or say it slowly, because we don't have a recording secretary here today, so if you could do that again for
Reading
Jenny.
Board of Education exercise its option to renew its contract with Chartwell's for the 1920 fiscal year.
And David, you made the same motion?
Substitute the word Easton.
Okay, excellent. Second, very good.
Substitute the word,
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, thanks, Gwen. Any further discussion from any of the boards?
Chris, explain his motion. What are you trying to accomplish with that motion?
As Jeff explained, the contract has renewal options on a year-to-year basis. And so it's the board's obligation to renew the option to continue the contract for another year, subject to the terms of the contract, which Scott said carries a 3% CPI increase.
Absent the motion, it expires.
I just break in for a second.
Sure.
The reason it's structured that way, because 10 years ago, there was a lot of fuss about the previous food service provider. And I got to chair the food service committee that ultimately selected Chartwell. And the reason it was structured that way is that no food service provider would come in on a one-year basis. But we wanted to have at least a little bit of a control, so that if we ran into some sort of situation where we were dissatisfied after 1 year or 2 years or 3 years, it wasn't like, oh my God, we can't stand it for another year, but we can't get out. So that's why this provision, it's sort of a protection for us. It assumes everything's gonna go well, but it protects us if it doesn't. That's why it's structured that way. And it requires us to renew it every year that we choose to renew it, because, if we knew at the end of year 3 that this isn't working out, they changed everything and they put in pasta that nobody eats. I won't go to animals. And then it would probably take the better part of a year to work into another contractor, because the process is lengthy and painful. At least it was for me, but
The wording of the motion sounded to me like there was some doubt or issue. Like, the way it was worded to me sounded like you wanted to be able to review something further for the coming year.
The contract requires us to do that review, and so I was affirmatively saying, let's continue with that.
Exercise the option means to affirmatively exercise the option.
Any other questions? Reading, you want to vote first?
Any other discussion? Yeah, all in favor? Good. Unanimous?
Easton, any further discussion? All in favor? Okay. Okay.
Jeff, I've brought with me copies of the signed contract. After the meeting, I'll ask each of the board chairs to sign.
Okay. Very good. Thank you, David.
And I'm sorry, who was your first and second on that?
Oh, it was Graziano and Denny.
Okay, Bus Depot. I asked that that be put on the agenda because I wanted to share some information. This information was sent to the board chairs, but I thought at least at this point, it's something that should be shared with everyone, just kind of an update as to where we are. Now that the bus depot, or now that we don't own the buses, and the town that houses those buses can charge property tax, and the property tax, according to for a student, is in the area of $150,000 a year. The place that houses the buses can also charge rent to the districts that use those buses. The lease is currently $110,000, and their estimate of the deadhead labor and fuel that is being expended by transporting the buses from Bethel down here, do the runs, then end up going back, is another $150,000 a year. So we're talking about $400,000, give or take. And it seems to me like we're not, we're the ones spending all the money. We're not the ones at the receiving end, but we could be. Now, we had this discussion a couple of years ago, and there was some work done to see where a bus depot could be housed, whether it could. We asked Reading for their input. I asked Easton for selectmen for their input to see what might be some reasonable solutions. Reading came back at the time, as I understand it, and said, we don't have any room. There isn't any public land that's available. Perhaps someone privately might be interested in doing it, but as far as public land goes, there isn't any. Easton found some, and it's in the back of Samuel Staples. We looked at some other spots too, but in Samuel Staples there is land house a bus depot. It kind of the idea died on the vine, but at that point we still own the buses, so the property tax issue was not in play, and but now we don't own the buses. We're getting all kinds of pressure. We all are from Hartford, and what are they going to do, and maybe more importantly, when are they going to do it? And so it seems to me like it would be in our collective best interest to find a place in Easton or Reading or Joe Barlow to house the buses. So I have a message into First Student in terms about their current lease with Bethel. We do understand that it is a 5-year lease. What they had originally asked for was a 2-year lease with 3 one-year options. The Bethel landowners said that wasn't acceptable and that it had to be a 5-year lease. And so that's what we know to date. So this is not an immediate thing that any of us have to jump on. I'll be meeting with, or at least speaking to the folks at First Student to understand more clearly what their contract says and express our interest, if there is interest, to redirect the bus depot to someplace either in Reading or at Barlow itself or in Easton. There's obviously more money for whoever houses it because the property tax that is going to be coming is going to be coming to you. And the lease, that's obviously something that could be negotiated. The deadhead fuel and labor, the way that would be calculated is each bus is $58,000. And so each bus then would the cost would be a deduction, a percentage deduction based on the $150,000 a year that we don't spend for this deadhead run. So if we were to move it into Easton, Reading, or Barlow, there is a benefit for everyone because the cost of the buses themselves are going to go down. In terms of the lease payment and in terms of the property tax, that has to do with whoever is the town or the entity, which is Barlow. They would be the benefit. They would get the greater benefit because of that. It's no secret. Selfishly, I'd like it to be in Easton because we need the money. But understanding that Barlow is the hub of our 3 districts, and given that you've got student populations that is dropping, that it might be worth a look to see if some of the fields that you currently have that maybe aren't being used. And again, I don't run around up here and measure fields and look at stuff. It's been suggested to me by others that perhaps this would be a good site, so therefore I bring it forward for discussion and consideration. That's my speech.
Do we know in that 5-year contract where they are right now?
Well,
How many years in?
no, they're.
About to begin.
It's about to begin because we're still with DATCO this year, so it would start next year.
Or July 1.
Right, and I don't know if there's an exit clause. There's things that I still need to find out, but as we won't be meeting again for another 6 months, I thought it was in our collective best interest to at least put what we know on the table and invite some discussion.
And Scott, please correct me if I'm wrong. I had thought that your position was that if there was going to be a change, it would be between First Student and either the town of Easton, the town of Reading, not a tri-board configured ownership of a bus depot. I guess it could conceivably be a Region 9 owned bus depot, but.
I don't know about that because I don't know that, I mean,
So-
possibly, but they're not a taxing entity, so
Right.
they wouldn't receive municipal tax, property tax. But yes, the agreement of where a depot is the responsibility of First Student. And so I'm interested in them negotiating the best deal possible, but it's theirs to negotiate with any potential landlord that may be, private or public.
So given that, I'm not sure what the tri-board's role would be besides encouraging First Student to encourage the best, to negotiate the best deal they could
I did
negotiate.
I'm very interested on behalf of Easton to find out all I can and to put the depot in Easton. But we are a tri-board. We share in the transportation expense, just like we share in the food service expense. And I think it is a far better way to go to get the collective input of everyone and not be, well, gee, if I had known, if Mike said, gee, given the, and I'm not saying you said this, I'm just saying, given the.
Choose Paul, he's not here.
Parkin will say it.
Given what we found out in the change of population, this would be a great spot, and now Easton is competing with Barlow for the spot. I just think.
But if we're not if we're not
think
in
that's bad
control of it,
form.
what does it do for us?
Pardon me?
If it's not our responsibility, you know, I love chatting over issues with you all, but if it's not our responsibility, what difference does it make?
About $400,000
I
difference.
think we'd all be in
Reasonable that
support
we
of
can
saving
do.
lots of money.
I'm not, what I am, right, I mean, I'm not asking for the tri-board to vote on it, because there's nothing to vote on.
Okay.
But I also don't want the board to wake up and go, did you hear Easton put the bus depot, and now we're gonna send the lease payment to Easton, and they're getting the property tax, and they did all this, and they didn't tell a soul.
Okay.
Well, I don't think that's the way a tri-board should act.
I think we made a concerted effort as a transportation committee and then as a tri-board to enter into a contract with a provider who would handle soup to nuts transportation, so we wouldn't have to have these sort of granular discussions about where buses are gonna be parked. And to the extent that a depot, in conjunction between either the municipalities or a private landowner in either of these towns, contract with First Student, there will be a savings to all three districts as a necessary result of that. So even if somebody wakes up one day and says, you know, starts shaking their fist at the fact that the buses are staples now and Easton is getting some property tax revenue, they're also seeing a reduction in their year-over-year transportation costs, just as a matter of course.
They are.
So there's a.
But it's a matter of how much.
Some will be bigger winners than others, but
Yes.
everyone will see a reduction
Yes.
versus what it would be if it's saving value.
Yes.
Well, hopefully. See, I guess the only thing I'll say is, I really don't care where the buses are. Obviously, if there's a way that we can find some savings for Region 9 or the town of Reading, I'm happy with that. But I guess I couldn't even come close to making an opinion right now, because there's too many assumptions and holes in what we're saying. So essentially, what you're saying is that the town of Easton would not charge us property tax. We don't know that.
No, I didn't say that.
There's no way of knowing.
I did not say that.
No, you didn't say
The
that.
town of Easton would 100% charge First Student property tax.
So we're still paying the property tax.
Correct,
Okay.
through the contract.
Somebody's gonna have to build a depot, somebody's gonna have to pay for the depot, somebody's gonna want a commitment.
Easton's tax rate
to
might
get
be higher
enough,
than Bethel's, there's all kinds of
enough years of
things to figure
a
out.
lease that's gonna cover the
It's not our
cost of
plate.
it. There's too many holes here that nobody knows. I understand there's deadhead time that you save,
Nobody wants to build a bus
When it
depot if there are no
goes
buses
there.
to park it.
but what I'm saying is, my concern, or my opinion is that I'm looking for the best interest of Region 9, by extension, the town of Reading as well, but primarily Region 9, in that if 5 years from now, First Student comes and says, we have a state-of-the-art facility in Bridgeport where we can, you know, maintain these buses and do all this stuff, and we can charge half about my, I'm going there, I'm good with that. And I don't, at that point there, I don't want town of Easton to go, but you committed to us and our depot's only through 2 years old.
You never committed to anybody.
I'm not committing,
Fine.
that's what I'm making clear. I'm not committing to anything. This is all between First Student and wherever they want to put the bus depot. And I'm only interested in savings and convenience for our students. That's it.
Well, the difficult part in what you just said, Michael, is that the buses that serve Barlow are the same buses that'll also serve Reading, they'll also serve Easton.
Correct.
So if any one of us thinks we're just gonna pick up our buses and leave, it's not quite that simple.
He's saying in 5 years, when we go to renew with First Student or bid with whoever, bus company X comes out and says, I got a state-of-the-art facility in Bridgeport that's gonna save you $100,000 over keeping them in Easton because I can do all this maintenance, and the deadhead time's gonna balance out. And then whoever builds a depot in Easton's gonna be stuck holding a parking lot with no revenue. And he doesn't want folks in Easton to be bitter about the fact that the tri-boards moved all of the buses for all three districts to Bridgeport to save the district's money.
Which, as you pointed out, the tri-board can't
Can't
do.
do, right.
Because it's a
Right.
huge problem in the first
Exactly.
place. So I think,
You don't get to complain if you're
and that's what I was just gonna, no, what I was just gonna say is, I think that Jeff sat in that seat long enough and has enough gray hair that his reason for presenting this is exactly what you said, which is that even though when we have nothing to do with this in 3 years,
It's still our fault.
we're still gonna be screaming at each other across the table here. So I think your point is well taken. I think obviously we should, speaking again as an Easton person, we should look to, if we can do this, help everybody and make a deal with our student, but it's the town that's doing that. But I think Jeff is wise for just what you said, because there will be yelling when it's in Easton, if it ends up being in Easton.
Someone's
Or
gonna
if it
say,
falls
why
apart
is,
in Easton.
why isn't Reading getting this revenue?
Ultimately, our role is to facilitate the provider in being introduced to the right people in both these towns, and ultimately communicating to the people in the town what is happening and why.
Jeff, thank you for introducing and sharing the information with us, and I think we've got plenty to go back to our selectmen in town with at this point.
I agree.
Well supported.
One last question, Jeff. So there's a 5-year contract. It's getting ready to start. It's been signed between First Student and the landlord in Bethel.
Correct.
So this is something to talk about for 5 years from now, or we don't know the
I don't know,
terms?
and I don't know the terms.
Okay.
And as I say, it's gonna be 6 months before we meet again, or 8 months, or whatever it is. And so I thought, okay, probably need to let people know that at least what's being thought about, and that way it doesn't come in a rush next November or December if the dominoes start to fall and somebody says, well, gee, you've been working on this, why didn't you tell anybody? So that's just the purpose. I'm happy to check it off and move on to D. And plan of action for continuous improvement, 10 action steps.
We are, I'd like to thank the administrators for coming tonight. We have Easton, Reading, and Region 9 represented. I'd like to hold myself to the same expectation that I have of the administrators, which is we're doing more to make our thinking visible to you and the public. So what I'd like to do is show you some of the topics that we'll be working on at our summer retreat. All of the administrators have committed 2 days to us coming out with a easier to understand strategic plan. And so I want to run you through them. There's really only one of them is a suggestion for board level action. The rest is stuff that we want to work on, and we want you to have an insight into what we're thinking about right now. So I'll remind you of our, so this is interesting, Ryan.
That projector's on freeze.
Yeah. So we're trying to connect the cycle of the year. Are we coming out with ER9 goals? Is each building coming out with a clear set of achievable SMART goals? How are those translated into what we're asking teachers to do? Part of the work we did this year was to look at the wording of our student learning objectives we ask of each teacher to better tie them to each building's goals. Then, with that underway, the next big item for the year is asking for resources. Coming up with a budget, and this is where I do have a suggested homework assignment for the 3 boards. When we have the budget functioning, then what's the real work of teaching and learning, and to what degree in each of our classrooms are we implementing our curricula with fidelity and following through? in the active teaching and learning? Are we measuring that multiple ways? And then are we taking the time to interpret our students' performance in both positive ways, appreciatively, what's going well that we want to build on, and critically, what do we need to improve, which then should lead to the next articulation of our SMART goals. And as we're bringing that into focus, we think there's a number of underlying activities or actions that we should be taking to better support continuous improvement in the system. I want to run you through the top 10 as I see them. This is the work we'll be doing this summer when we gather together all the administrators to come out with, for you, a better understandable plan of how we want to spend our time. So first on my list at the moment is the work to understand and right-size the Barlow staff, faculty, and program as we continue to experience a projected and likely decline in student enrollment. We're trying to look forward, make our thinking visible, and Dr. Pinn and the administration at the high school has developed a rubric, a heuristic device to understand how we should be thinking about that, and looking beyond the 1 year to 1 year to 1 year to actually planning forward. And we've been working on this for more than a year, and we know that by committing ourselves to presenting it to the curriculum or the budget committee, that we'll move ourselves forward. This has got to be the big thinking of the Region 9 community. What does a school system with several hundred fewer students at the high school look like, and how do we make that an asset and benefit to the kids that are there? A smaller school should be more intimate. We should have greater knowledge of the kids, and at the same time, we should be mindful of the provision of resources or the cost. So what we have so far is some real thinking at the department and building level about right sizing. And Gina's team has committed to working on this summer to actually try to do some logistics behind what does it mean. You have an athletics program that has 35 teams for about 700 kids. When you have 450 kids, what will the program look like? We're not offering, so please don't ask for, a date and number, on this year, when this enrollment reaches this number, this is how many English teachers we'll have. But we can say, let's think about the direction of the right sizing as we go, and learn some lessons from the right sizing that took place in Easton and Reading as that population also declined.
Need an order of importance?
Not necessarily. That's certainly first in my mind, and in terms of us thinking about the decline in enrollment in Barlow and how to manage that with the two factors always being excellent service to the kids and cost effectiveness. Not more or less important, but this year we've spent a lot of time and attention investing in the internal capacity of our special ed program to provide for our kids in town. And it's always got to be what's best for the kid, and then how do we most efficiently achieve that. We want our kids with special needs, with their friends in the general population, living in their own houses, coming to our schools, enriching us with their presence. And the big challenge as we see it is stabilizing the leadership of special education, a ferociously difficult and challenging job, as we know, and one that has had quite a lot of turnover. We feel good about our new director of special services for Easton and Reading, Jennifer Del Conte. But if we don't change the structure supporting her, then 2 years from now you'll be doing another search. Because I think we have wrongly and consistently said what's wrong with that person when we should be saying, what's wrong with the structure that makes that job intolerable for that person? So I've listed for you some of the things that we've done. We are aggressively trying to find experienced supervisors of special ed to support the new director in each of the districts. That search is still underway.
Do you think the switch to a director, two supervisors, will help the stability situation?
I think that we know that that having one supervisor and one director wasn't working. We think that having the director in charge of the 4 buildings with a supervisor to focus on each of the districts is a more stable structure. And I don't know if you should be entertaining actually going back to having 3 full directors. That seems to me to be pushing us against our desire to align programming. But I do know that it's more work than we can reasonably ask of 2 people, and with the right 3 people, I think that we can stabilize.
Is there a concern that the 2 supervisor positions will sort of start to exist as stepping stones for directorships elsewhere, and we'll have a revolving door problem at that level?
Yes and no. It's not true that every assistant principal aspires to be a principal. I think if we can build a good team that people want to remain part of. And I think there will continue to be turnover at directorships in the region just because we're consuming those human beings. So I'd like to see us try to build a mutually supportive team that wants to be here.
You feel it's the structure that's the reason that we're having difficulty holding on to directors? Or do you feel it's the increase in the number of students that are being identified, which puts pressures on the director because there's an increased cost, which is, I mean, is it the structure, or is it just circumstance that it wouldn't matter who you put in that position, you're going to burn them out in 2 years because of the demands of the job?
I think that if we undertake several different approaches to leadership in special ed, that we can stabilize those positions. It's very stable at the high school. We have found the increase in identification has translated into a significant percentage of the director or the supervisor's time being spent in PPT meetings. When they're not in PPT meetings, they might be in mediations, they might be in other ways that they're not present in the life of the school day. So how do you improve a program when your 3 administrators can't be present in the working day to steer and guide it? So we've met with union leadership, we've met with Vicki and I, with many of the teachers and paras in Easton to try to profile what they're looking for and to ask them to participate in an induction program. That's part of what we'll be planning the first 100 days for these 3 people. I do think that the cost weighs very heavily on administrators in special ed. They're mindful of how it's going. We know it's happening right across the state, but I think it's also a job that calls people who care deeply about kids and are willing to make that commitment if we're reciprocating. I'm not sure that we've done a good enough job investing in the emotional well-being of our directors and supervisors, and with some more structure, I think we can do that. We've seen some other positive changes over the course of this year in the introduction of the Bridges program here at the high school, in tightening up the understanding of how the basis programs are working at the other schools. In each of the 4 feeder schools actually adopting a goal to help kids become more independent, which seems kind of self-evident, but the mindset of special ed is we help you acquire skills and resources that allow you to manage your own academic life. And in the absence of really designing for that, you get a dependency where I'm never going to leave special ed ever. And so I think there's a lot of stuff that's gone on over the course of the last year. And our real task in special ed should be to strengthen our internal capacity and most importantly, make that a survivable position for the 3 people that come into that job.
How optimistic are you that we'll be able to find the 2 supervisors
I'm very confident.
before September?
Yep.
There was a high number of applications, approximately 100 and...
For the assistant principal at Reading Elementary, there were 154.
That's the one.
There were a couple dozen for supervisor, of which about half weren't really viable candidates for us, for one reason or another. We've gone out and invited some people we know to be strong administrators to interview with us, and they've agreed to. So we do actually think we have some strong candidates for you.
New director is involved in that selection?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, yep, has been involved all along. But, and I think a theme you're going to see is we have to be thinking about providing for our children in the best way possible and trying to find ways to manage the cost. The biggest costs to us are human resources and then special ed. So by investing in your special ed administrators, should be able to free them to get into the program and make the program work better, and people are happier when programs work well. So until we can get those administrators into the functioning of the special ed program, then we're probably not going to break a logjam. But so we're undertaking to define more carefully the role of case manager, to pass the managerial aspects of special ed down the pyramid a bit to get our leaders where they can improve the program. Better program, better positive spin. The third...
Tom, just a quick question on the special ed. So
Sure.
how will, with the new structure in place in the K through 8, how will the coordination with Barlow change or not change with Patty and team?
Yeah, it's something we have thought about in terms of finding a good potential partnership part of what we were looking for in the director was someone who would work well in the handoff. As you all know, you here and those at home on the camera, I adore Patty Roscoe. I think she's one of the finest educators that we have, but she's not going to be here year after year after year after year. Part of what we have to think about is succession planning. And there's a whole line of questioning about how do we design the handoff from 8th grade to 9th grade that I'm feeling pretty good about.
Great.
This is not an action for the administrators. It's third on my list because I think we have to pay attention to this. The way we go about doing our budgets is, to a large degree, the way we have gone about doing our budgets in the past. It takes half a school year, and we end up, I don't know that we end up at the resolution of that in a better place than we could be. I propose that the 2 boards, the 3 boards here, the 2 boards of finance should think about the structure of the cycle of the year. One thing I believe would be easier for us to understand is simply to have a more clear understanding of the financial capacities of both towns to support public works. I find it personally very frustrating to spend several months presenting and arguing for the itemized budget to find ourselves at the 11th hour at a Board of Finance meeting where that rich conversation has not been fully participated in by everybody, and we end up nattering over stuff. Couldn't there be some town elder conversations about, is this the best way to go about it? Now, I don't think you should just have your boards of finance say to you, lock it in at 1.6 because that's all you're getting, because your task is to develop the estimate of what you need year to year. But I also think that the way we've gone about this is incredibly time-consuming on us, and the more we spend on this, it's several months that we're not in making your program better. So, and one of my themes is how to get the management part tighter so you can have more leadership from your very fine administrators. So I think, for instance, that there are some super bright people in both towns who are economists or financial advisors who could say, let's look historically at our taxable assets and how much of the district's, the 3 district costs has been needed over in the past. You get a sense of what would the town support, and if you look forward together, what can the town support? We often hear about bridges that need to be replaced, but never formally. It's just stuff that we administrators pick up, and we're sensitive that we work for you, and you have more to finance than just the schools. And I suggest that perhaps some summertime barbecues in someone's backyard, or something so that we could redefine the approach so that it isn't, to take out some of the, everyone's playing a role that's important. Board of Ed member, Board of Finance member, and sometimes that ends up in animus that I just don't think is necessary. So I suggest that a way to improve our programming is to undertake to think about the cycle of how we say these are the resources we need, and how the town says, yes, this is how much you can have.
Is there a way we can start the budgeting process earlier?
I think we are now at a point where we are doing, in effect, year-round budgeting.
Well, no,
But this is exactly what I think,
No.
like, why does Region 9 have to go last?
Well,
You know,
well,
that-
and exactly, look, I totally understand the limitations of the administration, but the, you know, to change the way we do things, basically every town in Connecticut goes through the same process that we do, okay? The trouble is, we have 3 budgets, 3 boards, and we start in December. Now, I understand you're doing stuff way before that, but essentially the budget cycle starts in December. And then what happens is it's so compressed that it goes through the board for a month and a half, sometimes 2 months. Then it goes to the Board of Finance where they have like 3 weeks before you're going to go out to referendum, or 6 weeks before you go out to referendum. And that's what causes this whole kind of agitated exercise every year. And I'm wondering, like, realistically, 80% of the budget, maybe 75, is extrapolated year over year. And those other 25, 25% is what you really have to work on and really is the difficult task. Is there a way to start sooner? I know like towns like Ridgefield, they're doing their budget in the summer, and again, one board, one budget, but it's presented to the town much earlier in the cycle, and then there's months before it needs to be, action on it. And I think that's part of the problem, is that everything is so compressed that you go, here's the budget, it's 4%, we've talked about it, this is really the best we can do, we've looked at this, we've looked at that, we've reduced this, we've added that, and here's what it is, and they look at it and they go, yeah, but it's 4%, no good, so.
Mike, one thing that I've met with the Board of Finance leaders in Easton, and we have agreed that we will start discussing in the fall, October. So that I need to get a feel for what they for what they're looking at, just like they need to get a feel for what I'm looking at, rather than waiting for the district to create this budget, and then we spend months beating it up, and then we take it to the slaughterhouse, and it gets smacked again, and then everyone walks away mad. It just seems like it's you'd think after 6 straight years of this, I would have caught on, but
So I think the point that you're
I'm a
making
slow
is,
learner.
how can you conceive of the process of getting resources to the teachers differently, including timeline? What you can't do, and I hate bringing this up, because we always find ourselves going like this, is you can't simply say, Scott, do more work, because you're already exceeding a reasonable workload for your director of finance every week. So if we want to talk about a greater financial transparency of those things, you have to put resources towards that, too, you know?
No, and I wasn't suggesting,
I know,
you know,
I just,
beat the hamster. What I was suggesting was staggering things a little differently so that maybe they're doing more budget stuff in the summer, and then they can do some of the other things while that document is being brought through, you know. There's
Mike, it sounds like an underpinning of your question is how soon realistically can you have any kind of estimate for a successive fiscal year?
yeah.
Can you sit here in July and start talking about next year so that in September we have, here's the 3 fundamental drivers for next year, or is that just too premature?
Yeah, so this is the conversation that I think it would be great for the board committee on budgets to have. So for instance, at the high school, one of the golden nuggets, one of the secret sauce components is that you're allowing the students to drive the design of the schedule. We don't say we're going to offer 2 sections of jewelry, and if you get in, you get in, and you don't get in, you don't get in. We ask the kids, what course do you want to take? And if there's enough kids who sign up for 3 sections of jewelry, we try to run 3 sections. In some of those other schools, they just say, this is how many sections of AP there's going to be, this is how many, and they can build that master schedule whenever they feel like it, because they're just dropping kids in. So when you're doing that, you're not doing the course selection process until the end of, say, January at the very earliest, sometime in February, which pushes your whole thing back. So I do think you can.
Which is better?
Oh, absolutely.
That's for
Yeah.
you.
Yeah,
Is
right.
it better to give the students the choice and deal with the fallout on your end, or is it better to lock it in and say there's 2 sections of jewelry?
I think it's
and-
absolutely better the way we do it here,
But if
especially
that's-
with fewer
so-
kids.
But if that is a Barlow restriction and not an Easton Reading restriction, what's stopping a divorce in the process and having the lower school's budget start earlier?
Well, so these are the conversations that I want you to have. The other thing that we find really difficult to accomplish is to get all these people to actually take their vacation. You know, so we're often saying, gee, they look tired and grumpy, but then we want them to do more work. You know, so I want them to have times when they can shift down. But I do think we are now in a phase where budgeting has got to be a year-round concept, and I'm suggesting that it would be time well spent to get the various town elders together to talk about how do we make it so that you don't come out of it feeling enervated and angry and whatever.
Scott, when is a reasonable time for you to have the final close from this fiscal year complete? Beginning of September, end of August, when the book is fully closed?
Best case is going to be into August. And it depends ultimately on closure of bills that hang out and are late in arriving. That's typically the longest thing. So I think we did it in late August last year, so August, September.
I'm wondering if a review of the close would be helpful for everybody, boards of finance and board of education inclusive.
Tom, this is an excellent charge. Thank you for bringing it to our attention. Jeff, I wholeheartedly agree with you that the process is riddled with lunacy, and I would love to talk to the Reading Board about how they set up their retreat, what their committee, their budget committee is charged with. I think it'd be worth just a backdoor conversation with Reading about some of the changes that we've made.
We'll be with you guys in a couple of weeks.
Perfect. Next.
So, as you have fewer students, So I'm going to talk about technology, but at no time am I saying that we're going to replace human beings with robots. I am going to say that in every single profession, through the medium of technology, hybrid, online learning, whatever you want to call it, you have fewer people doing more rewarding work because you're able to use technology for both efficiency and effectiveness, right? I don't think I've talked to a bank teller ever, in my adult life, because I go to the ATM. That doesn't mean the work that the bank manager is doing is less rewarding. I think they're inside working out bank loans and deals and doing more interesting stuff. We have our technology plans are antiquated. The state stopped asking for updates a couple of years ago, and so it's time for us to work on a unified, updated technology plan. It's one of the tasks I'll give to the administrators. But more importantly is a shift in understanding of why have technology at all. And the preponderance of our use of technology is to support a teacher-centered presentation of a lesson. That's why we put in all those smart boards. Instead of standing at the blackboard, I'm now standing at the smart board. And it's cool because whatever I write there, I can take a picture of and send it to you, so when you're doing your homework, you can go back and look up what I explained in the lesson, but it's definitely teacher-centered. As we have fewer students, we should be thinking about technology as a medium of learning as well as a means of supporting a teacher's presentation, of shifting the focus from a teacher-centered in many places to a student-centered activity. For instance, a smart board is something a presenter uses to talk to a passive group, but there are also smart tables that have the mathematics embedded in the table, and you can do all kinds of nifty things. The idea that I want to get out here, though, is we should be unifying a technology plan. And the way to go into that is for us to look at the very fine, well-articulated international standards of technology education, ISTE standards, and bring those into play in our curriculum design. There's almost no future pathway for our kids that doesn't need a literacy in technology. So we should be embracing that. We shouldn't be afraid to go find and demand high-quality courses to supplement our curricula as we find it more difficult to provide in-house. We already do this at the high school. We have 2 sections of virtual language lab. You can take Swahili if you like, and the kid next to you is taking Hebrew, and the kid next to him is taking Polish, and there's a licensed, certified world language teacher there to keep moving and keep it honest. But instead of just offering Spanish, French, and Latin, we can offer any language that we can find high-quality instruction for. So I think we need to update our plans and bring the focus of technology onto student-centered learning. Away from where it is right now, which is largely teacher-centered or efficiency. What do our kids do with these things? They use calculators and they type on. I know I'm giving you 10 different topics, so I've written you your own little newsletter. And in it, I've tried to address all of these topics, including in technology, the concept that we call SIMMER: substitute, augment, modify, and replace, and have better learning for kids that lasts longer with greater understanding, costs less. So there's a role for us to think about in technology planning. And of course, I'm going to agree with anybody who goes, I'd rather have my kid be working with a human being, and me too. I just want your kid to be working with a human being who's using technology as powerfully and effectively as possible.
Dr. McMorran, who does something like that, a technology plan?
Well, we have, at the high school, we have Chris Angel, our director of technology, and then everything else that we don't know what to do, we give to Dr. Pearson Yu, who's our default director of technology.
This is actually on the agenda and long-term planning for the Easton, Reading, and Region 9 Technology Leadership Committee. So this is work
So your
that's
staff,
ongoing,
or
as well
org
as
staff.
work with the library media specialists where we still have them.
You heard that.
My fifth action is to take advantage of an asset we currently have and aren't using. Every teacher, through our state-approved teacher evaluation plan, gets evaluated and gets feedback on classroom instructional practices. We use the class system that looks at 3 domains of the art and science of teaching. And our administrators are all certified in this. They evaluate, they give the teacher feedback. What I'm going to ask the administrators to do is to move one step up, because we've aggregated now hundreds and hundreds of classroom observations. So we should be able to engage in some analytics on overall in each of our buildings. What are the strengths that we see most of our teachers have? What are the areas for improvement? How should PD be connected to that? It's simply, it's one of those things that we say, we'll get to it in the summer. And we always think the summer, the 9 weeks of the summer, is equal to the 10 months of the school year. And so we should be taking greater advantage of all the effort we're putting into evaluating our classroom staff.
Do we have staff trained to do the analytics that we're looking to pull out of the data?
Yeah, it's actually,
Say it more confident.
The folks here, if we can aggregate that data and get it back to them, it's all that time consumption of getting it pulled and put out in a format that they can use. Once they have it, they can do neat things with it, but we have to allocate time to actually get into the class system and pull all that data and put it together. We're actually pressuring them to put in their own analytical module for us so that we don't have to do it by hand. Which leads us to our school. Our data management system is one of the biggies. It's become, I think, in Connecticut, the largest software student data program in the state, and we have now tried a couple of years to bring online their student analytic module. The version we had initially contracted for was glitched, so they gave us the money back, and we put in some expectations for the next time, and now we are starting to make use of it.
So that we're really in year 3 of this work with Power School, and we are hopeful that this newest version of their data analytics tool will be useful to us. So we are finishing up the onboarding process of loading all of our standardized assessment data for all 5 buildings into the program, and it will give us the ability to submit queries, to do some data analysis, of course, to inform instruction, inform intervention, but also our vertical work. So this will be the first time that we'll have everything in one place. Prior to this, all of the student performance data was really kept either at the school level or through the state website. So it's possible to see our student performance on the state measures or through the College Board, but everything is kept in separate places. So we're looking forward to being able to build in our internal measurements as well, so that we can do a little bit of comparison and begin to look at performance assessment as well as standardized measures and make it more our own. And we have not had the opportunity to do that up to this point.
And that would be available to each administrator and her team in the school, right? So
Yes, so all of the administrators will have permissions to view all 5 buildings as part of one.
And so the core leadership team, that's defined as what, department chairs, I guess in the case of Barlow, and then perhaps
We've set the permissions differently.
Okay.
So certainly Easton teachers won't be able to see Reading student information, but everyone on an administrative level will have full permissions, and DC's and leadership team at Barlow will have so slightly broader permissions in terms of looking at student performance feeding into Barlow and being able to plan accordingly.
I would have to imagine that would be a good thing, right, to have, say, I'll make this up, English teacher at Barlow, get a profile of an incoming student both at Keller and at John Reed, say, okay, what do I have here? And, you know, there might be more sharing in terms of how the curriculum gets
And have that
adopted.
accent as opposed to needing to send an email to say, I hear these results came back, could you please send me a spreadsheet with information?
So this is working towards a dashboard at the fingertips of the teacher to be much better informed about who's coming into her classroom, what the strengths are, what the needs are, how to better then tailor and design your lessons to build on strengths and backfill weaknesses. And so I had asked and then withdrew for a director of data management. At some point, you know, it's one of the things that would help us accelerate success, but can you afford it? And the reason I'm laying these out for you today is the work for us this summer is to triage this and get it into some kind of action plan so that we don't freeze up trying to do a little bit of all of it, try to get a sequence that helps us focus our own energies. Number 7 is, there's nothing new here, it's continuing the work of curriculum alignment. We've seen already the benefit of the math and the writing portfolio, middle school to high school transition work, bringing next generation science standards online. One thing that I want to raise with you is we heard from the boards, don't take our teachers from the classrooms. And so we really dialed back on having during the day PD work or curriculum work, but if you can't give us extra time in the form of extra money in the summer, and we can't pull teachers during the day, then the work slows down. So we don't want to be yanking them out to the level that gave concern particularly to the Easton board, but we do think that I guess the underlying thing is trying to work out our substitute supply in a time of record employment, so that Stephanie can call teachers to do some of this aligning work, and that does involve pulling them from some of their other duties.
Now, my understanding is curriculum is an ongoing process that never ends.
Right.
I get that. Alignment is not something that's happening in every district. Alignment is because we have 2 feeder districts and we want to make sure they're doing the same thing feeding into Barlow. We've been doing alignment for 5 or 6 years. How long does alignment take before you're aligned? Obviously, curriculum is ongoing. You get new things, it's ongoing. But the alignment process, how long does it take? Is it 30 years? Is it 40 years?
Yeah,
10 years?
it's not a,
7 years?
don't conceive of it as a process that we're going to build a railroad from here to the West Coast and at some point it'll be there. It's a never-ending cycle.
It's
So
dynamic.
But curriculum is an ongoing cycle. Alignment is once you're both doing the same things, you're aligned.
Even in our Ridgefield, which we're using a lot tonight, you've got Scotts Ridge Middle School and East Ridge Middle School, and even when curriculum is aligned, you get drift if you don't keep it working. Each school develops its own culture, its own emphasis, and so that's the big task of Stephanie to keep it aligned.
Okay, and then the second question is on alignment. Alignment to me suggests that you want both districts to be doing close to the same things, right? But one district does Latin and is really adamant about the asset of gifted and talented, and then the other district doesn't do Latin and doesn't do gifted and talented. And so I look at this and I say, so we're aligning, but seems like those are two very, very big factors of what you're doing and or influences in how you're preparing students, and those aren't aligned at all.
I want, if a kid's taking honors algebra 2, I don't want the experience of honors algebra 2 to be so different from teacher A to teacher B to teacher C to teacher D that it's basically a different course. I want that teacher to put her mark on it, but I want the kids to go on the same course. And yes, there are assets and constraining factors in this structure. If either district over here would be happy to flip your middle school, elementary school, so we could have the same start and stop times, that would make it far easier for us to do this kind of work. But you're not going to do that, so it's something we work with. And yeah, you have different programs, so that's what we work with. But it's I'm not looking for uniformity, like every Big Mac comes out of every franchise the same. We're looking for alignment.
Looking for common expectations for students. The way that the teacher accomplishes that in his or her classroom is part of the beauty of a good teacher. But we need the students to have very clear and common expectations, whether you're in 5th grade in Reading or 5th grade in Easton. And so as they move through the system, it comes together when they're at Barlow. So there are some program differences, absolutely, and some budget differences. But we have common expectations in the world language department.
Is it almost like, is a good analogy, just so we can understand it better, more of like governance, like U.S. government, for example, right? We have a constitution, we have a Bill of Rights, we have a set of rules that all 50 states have to live by, right? But at the end of the day, each state can implement it the way it wants to, right? So there's this concept of a federal government that has to make sure that everybody really does it, generally speaking, the same way. I mean, is that an oversimplification of what alignment is for curriculum?
Can I speak to it as a teacher?
Yeah,
Does that
absolutely.
help?
Yeah, I'd love to.
Yeah.
Just to
So-
save you for a minute.
I yield to the learned gentlewoman.
By the way, I'm buying into that it's an ongoing process, but that's kind of the way I'm trying to understand it.
Absolutely ongoing process. So for example, in New Canaan High School, there are a half a dozen biology teachers. And we meet on a rotating basis in what's called a PLC, or professional learning community. And it basically means the 3 or 4 of us that have a common planning period sit down, and we are talking about assured experiences. We're having conversations about incorporating NGSS into our curriculum. And it's an ongoing, week to week, month to month, and then there are bigger annual conversations that we have at the end of the summer and at the beginning of the year. And our goal as a department is that while I may do a frog dissection to illustrate evolution in certain species, my colleague may not, but we still have the same standards and expectations for common understandings, like overarching themes, core concepts in evolution that all students are going to leave New Canaan High School with. How we choose to get there is our own personal domain within our classroom. We might have slightly different laboratory experiences, but we want the students to come away with the same skills and knowledge having taken biology at New Canaan High School. And I think with the tri-district structure, that's even more challenging when you've got 4 different schools and little kids moving K through 8, and they're all going to merge together at Barlow to make sure that there are assured experiences, common expectations, and again, each unique teacher is going to do that slightly differently, but that they all arrive in 9th grade with the skills that they need to take advantage of the breadth of courses that are here.
Thanks. That was great.
But that is, I guess another sub-theme as I'm talking through this is, how do we want Stephanie Pearson-Ugal to spend her time to bring greater value to our kids? And how is she spending her time? And just at least being mindful of, out of the 100% of her time as Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction, what percentage of that is not spent on that because she has to do the other stuff. She has to go to the regional meetings of the directors of technology because we don't have a director of technology, and somebody needs to go to that. How are our principals spending their time, and how can we help shift it so that they're spending more of their time in the rewarding work of leading the school and less of their time in the management. And so that's the next thought that I have in mind. If we can view these administrators, these 5 principals and their teams, as a huge lever, an asset to be deployed to the benefit of our kids, I think we very often look at them as the mules that are going to pull the cart, up the hill and down the hill. We cannot invest in them the way we would like to. We would like to send them to professional development or to spend more time with their colleagues in tri-state. And often we're so busy cutting down the tree, we never sharpen the saw. So we're thinking that one of the ways to better support them is to redefine the relationship between the central office and 5 buildings. Largely what central office does now is pay the bills, keep the lights on, make sure the permit got issued or didn't get issued, and then follow up on that. Get the bus to the right corner without it hitting a tree or something. It's a lot of the work we do is simply managerial. And what would need to be different to unlock the potential of the administrators, part of that being how do the office of superintendent, assistant superintendent, spend simply more time helping the principals grow in their own craft, because I can't send them to the ISTE conference, and this is one of the reasons I want that budget conversation to take place. The very first thing we cut out is professional development. We are now hiring rookies to replace veterans. At some point, if you're hiring rookies and you're not developing people, then you don't have the same workforce that you have grown over time. I think this cycle is something for us to be mindful of. And if we do have the temerity to leave in some funding for administrators, it often comes at, oh, you're paying for yourself, but you're not paying for that. So we often cut it out even when we think we should be investing in it, because we don't want to look bad in front of the camera. But I think you have people who have made long commitments to you, and if nothing else, how can we spend more time with our own managers working through their work instead of doing that management stuff? And then just 2 to go. We believe, I'm speaking we on behalf of the administrators, that we should do more to continue to recognize and take action on the fact that our children are experiencing far greater anxiety and far less serenity, and their social and emotional well-being should be as important to us as their academic growth, particularly when we know that the stronger the social and emotional well-being, the greater your academic achievement is. So even if we didn't care about it, we would still pursue it to keep academic excellence high. I feel that we have attempted many things, but it should be standardized in the sense that we have a through line. So we have the program of second steps, and we have the experience of Wingman, and we have something of our own version of the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence Ruler program. We're not actually paying for it, we're kind of importing it. So we have an approach that we could understand and resources that we could support it, but we want to actually come out more firmly and say, children have the right to be happy as children. And we're seeing too many kids wrestling with that. And I'm not trying to take over people's parenting. I don't want to do that. I do want us to say, complete human beings come in. We have always had, you have always had a commitment that you are doing more than simply plugging in math and literacy. You are at 3 districts that care about the whole child. Let's bring that out more strongly in our statements and our beliefs and our actions. We've got a lot of things going, but giving them permission to take the time to actually invest in it would be a good step. And investing in it would be an even better one. But so often, we're trying to make things work, and with greater, if we can find efficiencies elsewhere, can we allocate more of our time towards this? All of us share concerns about our youngest kids, kids coming to school who cannot regulate their own behaviors, and kids who are feeling the in-the-air pressure of the college admission process. Even though in the last 30 years, a kid at Barlow who wanted to go to college went to college. It's not like it's not working, but it's generating so much anxiety that we need to pay attention to it. And punishing kids for vaping is not the right way to go about. Let's figure out a way they don't feel the need to vape because they don't feel the pressure to. So there's lots of implications there, but it's simply embracing that the head and the heart go together is, I think, it's something for us as a leadership team to talk about. And then my number 10, and then I'm done. The Region 9 board asked me to look into succession management. We're thinking of our senior staff, and it's not a plan for replacing people. Succession management is how do you support the top administrators in any system, in any institution, so they're growing and producing and want to stay, and what systems need to be in place to let that happen well. And when it doesn't happen well, then we replace the director of special ed, and then we replace the director of special ed, and then we replace the director of special ed, and then we replace the director of special ed. And we blame that person. She was too mean, he was too tough, she didn't know what she was doing, this person's skills weren't up to it. Let's think about how to frame the relationship between the community and the big five over here. Kim Fox couldn't be here tonight. And in a way that there is a plan, so that when people leave you can find the replacements, slot them in, and help them be successful. So that, thank you for indulging that. I wanted to have you know what we're going to be spending our time and energy on in the summer. We're going to come back at the end of the summer with an action plan, with some tasks and timelines. Not all 10 of these are going to be up there. Part of what we'll be doing is a forced ranking of how to spend the time. But for me, time is money. Time is money you've already spent. So if I can't address some of these structural, strategic issues with more money, and I want to address it by creating ways to spend our time more efficiently so that we're spending it on things that more directly and better serve our kids. Thus end the lesson.
Two comments, Tom. One, in a conversation the Reading Board or one of its committees had recently, we kind of broke down a little bit of what some of the administrators do with their days and how time is broken at that level. And I think we learned a lot of what Scott doesn't have time for example. And I think it might be instructive to everybody to kind of see that from everybody in central office, particularly the key administrators. When you talk about, I need time to focus on this, where is your time being devoted to? Because that will help us identify where there's a resource allocation problem as far as humans are concerned. Secondly, generally, thank you. This was very helpful. And thirdly, when it comes to resource allocation, is there anybody on lookout in central office or elsewhere for grants for things like the Yale training or other potential opportunities that all cost money?
We do have, we're fortunate in that a member of the public has volunteered to help us with some searching. Largely, we're trying to support the assets program at the high school, but we have not assigned someone at central office to spend time on looking for grants. We can turn to ELF on occasion for support. Would love to see the Reading Education Fund get back on its feet.
Any other questions for Tom?
I just have a comment. I think this is excellent, and I think it's a good way to keep us all aligned, not to use that word, no pun intended.
because at the end of the day, you know, we're 2 towns, 3 districts, 2 boards of finance, whatever the math is, but ultimately, we're teaching the same group of kids, and we're 2 communities, but we're 1 community from an educational perspective, and I personally would want to keep it that way, so I think this is a good way to keep us aligned, whoever, even if we, you know, they're new board members, and keeping it to a finite list like this is good, because then it all prioritizes all of us, you know, administration and the board, so I think it's an excellent way to start discussions earlier, and to the early discussions about budget and strategic vision. Some of the output of some of this, I could see at a board level being, okay, well, as 2 communities, what do we want to focus on? We want to focus on whatever's on here. It'll help guide the discussions going forward, so I think it's very helpful, and I'd love to be able to see more of these.
Anything else?
I'm sorry, if it's okay, since we've been through the meat of the presentation, can we send our principals home at this point? You guys have anything to report?
Drive safe.
Thank you.
Thank you for hanging in there with us.
Administrative reports. I think, Scott, you've got something for us on insurance?
I'm passing around the most recent statement of the employee benefits account for the central office. This is the insurance reserve. I go through this with each of the boards at each of the board meetings, but I also thought that this would be a good opportunity for us all to hear the same thing at the same time. Since probably January, I think I've been coming to each of you individually and expressing my concern of the continued very high claims that we've had in the central office health insurance reserve. And I was forecasting at that time that we would overdraw this account. That continues to be true. One of the things you'll see is a continued theme of what I've discussed with each of you individually. We now have 10 out of 12 months of claims experience. We had a little reprieve in the early part of this calendar year where claims began to revert to a more historical lower level. I had thought that would continue, but that's not been the case. So we continue to experience high claims in these last 2 months of March and April. So my main message is we're overdrawn on this account. We will finish the year overdrawn on this account. I would put our final overdraw, this currently says that we're overspent by $76K. We're probably going to end up right around there. There's obviously more claims to come in. There's also additional employee and retiree contributions to come into the account. So I think I'm going to land here at about $70K negative. Then my approach would be, and this is consistent with what I've reviewed with each of the boards as well, is to, in essence, tax each of the individual district budgets for 1/3 of the overspend. So if it's, call it $75K, it'd be $25K per district, which I would look to expend from the unexpended funds at the year end from each of your respective budgets. So as we go into our June meetings upcoming, we'll start to fine tune that process more specifically so that I have the full authorization to do that as I start to close the books in the July-August timeframe.
Does my board, do we have it available to give to you? Is it available?
Yes, I've included that assumption when I've done the projections.
Any other questions for Scott? Okay, thank you, Scott. Any other administrative reports? No, okay. Board of Education committee reports. Obviously, you heard from the food committee. Is there any other group that,
Just one more point about the wellness committee is that the nutritionist, I don't know that we actually explained that, but the nutritionist that I had met her, she left, so they're going to look to replace her. Stephanie, she's she's tall, youngish, but she was a great resource.
All nutritionists are at a premium.
Well, I don't know. she was a great resource,
Yes, she was.
for
She did a
our
very nice job.
schools, so if you knew her, she's,
Right. Any other board committees? Okay.
I think everybody got a report on an individual board basis from the Health Insurance Committee. We met several months ago. The main two things were that by putting our current contract back out to bid, there was a savings to each of the boards. And we had an extensive discussion comparing the state plan to our current options, which determined that for our particular situation, because actually by being self-insured, our costs are significantly lower than the other boards that you've all heard about going to the state plan, that it would actually be a significant cost increase for us to do so, keeping in mind that our insurance advisor is the advisor for a lot of towns that went to the state plan. So clearly, it's not an issue of their being biased against it, or that they tell everybody that they represent, don't go to the state plan. It was specific advice geared towards our 3 districts, which I found credible, and I think the other members did.
Any questions for David on that? Okay. There aren't any other reports, public comment? Okey dokey. Board member comment? Oh, must be butter because we're on a roll. Oh, I thought you handed me a note. Adjournment? Easton. Motion to adjourn from Easton, second. All in favor? Aye.
So moved again?
Seconded.
Just raise. Aye, okay, thank you. Mike?
Benny, seconded by
Second.
Graziano.
Okay,
All in favor?
all in favor? Okay, very good.
Jeff, who made your
9:30.
motion and seconded?
Pardon?
Made your motion to adjourn for the,
Randy did.
John, second.
thank you. You're welcome.
It's 9:33.
First time it was my motion, John.